I know Sam Amick of The Athletic is very passionate about sports in general. And unless I missed the mark, Sam, I believe you're also a fairly passionate baseball fan as well, are you not?
Funny you should ask. I mean, those are my roots as a fan.
Me too.
I'm guilty of the longer I've been basketball focused, the more I've lost my institutional knowledge of today's players. So it's like, yes, love the game, grew up a Giants fan, then kind of felt like a bandwagon Giants fan during the championship era, but that was, much deserved. But right now, couldn't probably name more than a couple players. But the sport itself, yes, I'm 100% on board. It was my favorite one to play growing up.
Yeah.
I had a short run as a plucky little catcher who enjoyed being behind the plate, and I love me some baseball.
You and I, it's almost a mirror. I believe you and I are both Giants fans, and I grew up huge fan, and we've just been discussing for the last half hour. That's why I wanted to ask you about how, for some reason, and I don't think it's because the Giants suck this year, because most of my life the Giants have sucked. There's just not that same passion. Maybe it has something to do with short attention spans and YouTube and Twitter and how baseball's not built for that. I don't know. But a lot of people bringing up the aesthetics of the game, the summertime, the barbecues, the background noise and all that. But, God, I don't get the same feeling on opening day I do for basketball or even football.
Yeah, no, I don't have that. Again, it's also a product of it was so much fun when the Giants were, at the level they were at for that stretch. So you kind of fall off in that way. And if I don't share this story with you, then our friend of the program, drunk neighbor John, probably will on the text line anyway. So I should just like own it. The levels of my baseball disengagement might have reached a point last year where I was very confused when I saw the Astros and Dodgers playing in the World Series, because I wasn't aware that Houston had switched sides.
Hey,
also,
dude,
that was 2 years ago.
It still happens. And yes, as Jay brings up, it was 2 years ago too.
Yeah, I was like, wait, is Craig Biggio still on the Astros?
Where's Jeff
what's going
Bagwell?
on here? Yeah.
Where's Mike Scott and Bob Nepper? Sam Amick with us. Sam, you're a professional journalist. Your credibility is king, and we often acknowledge that. So I just have to ask you: has there been any sort of a pool amongst your colleagues? We're trying to figure out what we think Jordan Bell ordered. We want to know what he allegedly charged to Mike Brown's card. Do you have any insight whatsoever? Because that's all I really care about.
I wish I did. It's weird. It's like it certainly has a comical element to it.
Right.
It's sensitive. The Warriors really didn't want it out. The answer is no. I don't know what he ordered. The thing that we didn't really go into any great detail on that is interesting is like when we have one sentence saying, they conducted an investigation. Like I think in general, we read right over stuff like that, and like I think I want to do a separate story that actually details like the fact that pro sports organizations have this wing that has become like CSI, where like these investigations are not really a small thing. Like and this is more serious, but like the fan situation with Russell Westbrook in Utah, like what sort of detective work is happening there. It's super interesting. So on something like this, like they had to do a pretty fair amount of digging on this situation. And then there was an aha moment, like, holy, what? It was Jordan Bell, which I just find fascinating. But no, I don't know what they ordered.
It's such a weird story. Like,
yeah.
You hear about stuff all the time that veterans take rookies out and stick them with a $20,000 bill, and you hear about pranks and all that. And here you've got, and I don't remember what it is anymore, but I know at least a few years ago, I think I asked what per diem was in the NBA, and I want to say it was like 150 to somewhere between 150 and 200 a day, on top of the millions of dollars they make. Like, I don't care what it was, whether it was something funny like porn, or it was drinks or room service or whatever it was he charged. Like, first off, it's like, why would you do that? And secondly, I guess we're past the point where it was a prank.
I can't totally speak on that other than, yes, I don't – it certainly wasn't taken as a prank.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
and this is a weird parallel, but when I was like in middle school, and I thought my dad was the coolest ever for this, but he used to like actually take me and a couple of my buddies out in like the AM hours and go TP people's houses.
Right.
That, you know, that we were friends with in school. But there was always that in between where like all it takes is one parent who doesn't think it's funny, and then you have a problem. So with Jordan Bell, you have a body of work here where maturity issues have been a concern for the Warriors already. So like a Jordan Bell prank at this stage, you know, if Steph Curry had done it, it would, you'd find some way to find it funny.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like it'd just be different because they have been worried about Jordan's decision making for quite some time. You know, and I feel bad for him. It's by his own doing, but like there had been a lot of positivity around him turning a new corner a little bit in that regard. And this is certainly a step backwards. I do definitely, you know, and maybe we didn't write this part strongly enough, but like, you know, it was strongly inferred to me that the question looms about how many people has he done this to and for how long. And so I think, you know, they obviously decided to come down on him.
Sam Amick of The Athletic joining us. I'm finding myself asking you this almost every week just for an update on your thought process. I want to get your thoughts on the MVP race. Is it a two-person race? And also on the Coach of the Year race, which is something you and I have talked about quite a bit. Because Sam, I keep waffling back and forth. This week I'm all about Nate McMillan, and next week I'll probably be Doc Rivers, and then I'll be back to Mike Budenholzer. I'm curious where you're landing right now.
You want me to do coach first?
Sure.
You actually, I feel like you just kind of said where I'm at. You know, it's like those three.
Yeah.
I don't think. I mean, is it a three-man race at this point? You know, I mean, you got a bunch of other guys who did really good work, but if the Spurs had continued to surge like the Clippers have, then maybe that would be different. Doc, it's funny because I think we talked about this last week, but I wrote this awards piece a few weeks ago, and I tried to almost do this weird thing where 3/4 of the way through the season I would publish the list of guys who were still in the running in my mind, and so I almost like unofficially eliminated some people from my own thinking. It wasn't on my Coach of the Year list. And it's like, all right, well, I'm going to have to break my own rule because this is absurd. I think he might be the guy. They are 15-5 since Tobias Harris was traded. Steve Ballmer made sure everybody knew that I want a competitive environment. I don't want to tank just so we hold on to our first-round pick because, as you know, they lost it by going this route.
Yep.
You know, if they would have missed the playoffs, they would have kept the pick. So I think Doc's done a wonderful job. But if Milwaukee, finishes strong and has that best record in the league by a healthy margin, I really think you got to look strong, look hard at Bud because he has it's a little like when Steve Kerr went to the Warriors and took the Mark Jackson foundation and just took the whole thing to another level. Jason Kidd, got those guys to a certain level previously, but this is crazy how good the Bucks have been. And people still don't appreciate, like, statistically the level of dominance happening with them right now. The record actually, you could make an argument it should be better than it is based on how dominant they are. So that would probably be my 1-2. Who else did you mention in that mix?
We had Bud, we had Rivers, and then Nate McMillan and what he's doing with it.
Yeah, no. It's been great. I don't see Nate winning it, but he'll be on the short list. They drop a game to OKC last night, and this was one game. But it's been crazy. They lose Victor Oladipo, and his defensive mindset certainly resonates with that team. So another guy who's doing a great job. The MVP side, it's funny. I'm excited to get – we got a project that I've been working on. It is tricky because it involves our whole staff, and I'm trying to get it out as quickly as possible. It's an anonymous players poll where we've been trying to get as many guys around the league to weigh in on things like MVP. And actually, part of the reason I want it out is because I think the player pulse could have play a role in the conversation. But put it this way, the players that I've seen the results of so far are just as torn on the Giannis, James Harden question as the rest of us. I think it's definitely a two-man race and a tough discussion. It almost, it feels like you kind of wish there was co-MVPs. I think it's really that close.
Just a cherry on top of the conversation we're having about Coach of the Year, too. We talked about Budenholzer, Rivers, and McMillan. we forget, or we didn't forget, but we don't even talk about how the Denver Nuggets missed the playoffs last year, and then now are fighting for the number 1 seed in the toughest conference in the league. And then, by the way, he won't finish top 5. He won't really get much of an acknowledgement. But my goodness, the Orlando Magic are 17-6 since January 31st, and Steve Clifford has to get some credit there.
For sure. I'll be honest, I thought you were going down the Dave Yeager road, which is another one.
Yeah.
There's that. But no, Steve Clifford's done a fantastic job, certainly of late. It's wild to see a team like that go from mostly mediocre to hottest in the NBA. So great coaching work. I think it's, and this kind of makes sense as a ripple effect. I think it's going to be quieter than normal summers this year. You have so much good coaching work happening that in terms of guys getting fired, I think there's going to be fewer openings. It's a lot of good work being done.
Sam Amick of The Athletic joining us. You mentioned talking to players and it being a two-person race and a tough one between Giannis and James Harden. One thing I've noticed, and we talked about this a couple days ago, Sam, that it seems like people are trying to manufacture it as a two-person race. I'm hearing a lot of players and a lot of noise about Trae Young, and no disrespect to Trae Young. And I remember hearing this about Donovan Mitchell last year, and Simmons ended up blowing him out. Sam, do some of these players have a point? Is it really becoming a two-man race for Rookie of the Year, or is this silly, and when it's all said and done, Luke is going to have like 90 of the 100 first-place votes?
I mean, I can't speak for my media brethren. I got all excited when I could tell that you and I were going to have a disagreement, which is always fun and good talk radio. Like I think it's a two-man race.
Really?
I mean, I've looked at the numbers. I have not dived into the numbers. I just know that Trae is just on fire, and he hasn't slowed down, and the Mavs have slowed down, and success matters, and the Hawks keep winning games. And, it's just incredible what he's doing. I know percentage-wise from three-point range that it's got – I think Trae's actually ahead of him at this point.
Yep.
He's not – he's going to get killed on the boards. That's just not part of his game. But, yeah, I think it's a two-man race, and I kind of think that, the reality is – that when Luka was on fire early, and I know I'm preaching to the choir in Sacramento, like the level of kind of, jumping the gun was a little nauseating in media and fan circles. And that's not to disrespect Luka at all, but, it's kind of like, all right, we're 2 months in, let's slow down. I do think it's a two-man race.
I think Trae Young is finishing strong, and I see a lot of since the All-Star break, but my problem is that since the All-Star break was 20 minutes ago, the All-Star break is not the halfway point of the year. The All-Star break is the three-quarter point of the year. I don't know. Let me ask you this. Do you look at the race as a start-to-finish type race, or do you give extra points? Do you give extra points for strong finishes? Give that to me again. I don't know why that didn't process. I'm asking, when you look at something like, say, MVP or Rookie of the Year, and I know that there are a lot of factors that go into that, from team record to individual, et cetera, et cetera. Do you, when you're turning in your ballot, do you look at the year as a whole, and that's how you determine it, or do you give some extra points for a strong finish? Does the way the player finishes matter? I mean, I guess if everything was equal and the stats were, it's not just stats, but if every other metric you were looking at or eyeball test you were looking at is equal, then maybe you give into the recency bias a little bit. But no, you got to remember that the work done in November, October, December matters just as much as the last couple months. But I just think that we it's funny, I don't know what you call the opposite of recency bias, but with awards, we are very eager to unofficially give them to certain people a couple of months in, and that happens a lot. True. I wrote an MVP column where I detailed 6 or 7 different candidates early in the season, and
literally had a line that was like, the Rockets are a train wreck, and clearly James Harden's candidacy is already off the rails, and that was premature. So I think it's almost the opposite of what we normally fight with recency bias, is like you can't psychologically turn off your critical thinking in February because a guy, had a really good start. So, but no, I mean, the last stretch shouldn't matter that much. I just think that the success does matter to me. I know Rookie of the Year is not typically one attached to collective success. What the Hawks are doing and the role that Trey is playing in it, and the fact, again, that Luka has trailed off and, and it's, again, I think it's close. I think it'll be, Luka's probably going to win it, but, it's just Trey will get some votes.
Sam Amick with us, and we're out of time, but people get mad at me, even though you cover things from a national scale, and there's really not a ton going on with the Kings right now other than finishing out the year. People get mad when I don't ask you a Kings question, so I'll finish with this Kings question in light of some of the revelations from your colleague Zach Lowe and others this week. I didn't want to ask this. Kyle wanted me to ask this. This is against my better judgment. Would you trade De'Aaron Fox and Marvin Bagley for Kristaps Porzingis and Luka Doncic?
Would I trade Fox and Bagley for Luka
and Porzingis?
It was totally my idea to ask this.
Yeah, I said no, dude. Don't ask.
It's the hang up is Porzingis and what he's going to be, post injury.
I asked because it was brought up that when the Kings had the 2 pick, that the Knicks made overtures about Fox, and Porzingis was part of that discussed deal. So it would effectively have been you trade Fox to the Knicks, you get Porzingis, which frees you up to get Luka. But now the Kings have Fox and Bagley and are perfectly happy. And I'm just kind of curious as to what smart people that cover the league that aren't in Sacramento necessarily covering.
Yeah, I just think it was just curious. Porzingis worries me, so I'd probably say no. It'd be a tough no. And for what it's worth, I believe I had heard that thing that Zach wrote.
Yeah,
but I think that happened again closer to when they actually traded him to Dallas. But it was interesting where they were doing a thing where they didn't call and say, "Do you want Porzingis?" They called and said, "Who's available?"
Right,
and they and when they asked for De'Aaron, there's like an implicit understanding that you would not ask for somebody like that if it wasn't for a high caliber player in return. So they wouldn't say Porzingis' name in the call, but I believe the Kings had another crack at it at that point. So I just think the momentum that they have with those two guys in particular, and somewhat not necessarily known commodities, but what direction their careers are going. Porzingis is a question mark that, I don't know, because that's one where you got to pay that max contract right away because he's restricted free agent.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to kind of say no, but then be nervous for the next 3 years that I made the wrong call.
For the record, I think you're correct. I think you're 100% correct. Kyle was adamant off the air that he would trade Fox and Bagley in a heartbeat.
You are the absolute worst kind of person.
Doncic and Porzingis. I was like, that's stupid, whatever, but there we go. Sam, I don't know if you know this, but you have a Q&A up on The Athletic right now. That was
Q&A Amick.
Q&A Amick. That was up from a – hey, what was the podcast idea somebody texted in? Remember, Sam, was it highly amicable? I think was the we had a couple ideas. I forgot to text you. He's got a Q&A up on The Athletic from a couple days ago that cover things from all around the NBA. You can also read his work. You did that with somebody else, I believe, as well, if I remember correctly, when I read it this morning on Jordan Bell. All kinds of stuff going on, Sam. Good for you.
Thanks, brother. I'm trying. They pay me for a reason. So.
You're doing. You ain't trying. You're doing. Sam Amick from Pleasanton, now lives in Elk Grove, joining us on The Drive, and we'll talk to him next Thursday. Thank you, buddy.
You got it. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
You're listening to The Drive.